All right, we're going to call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order on December 18, 2004, but there's an echo, so we're going to try to deal with that. Our tech expert is going to take care of it. All right, we're trying it again. It seems like it's working now correctly.
Awesome,
Thank you, Alderwoman Klee. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Thibodeau?
Here.
Alderman Govea is here. Alderman Moran?
Here.
Alderwoman Timmons?
Here.
Alderman Clemmons?
Here.
Alderwoman Klee?
Here.
Mayor Donches?
Here. Our first item is public comment related to any items that are on tonight's agenda. Is there any member of the public that would like to discuss any of them?
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. My comment's very brief, and it just happened to be reviewing these communications. I noticed some of the money is coming from ARPA 71, ARPA 53. Do we still have ARPA funds to expend, and are there more ARPA funds coming in, or is that ceased at this point? I'm just curious when we look at these.
I believe these are what's left over, and there will not be any more. I mean, we're not going to be getting any more. But we'll hear the details from the presenter, who I believe will be Mr. Cummings. All right, first communication, Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, Alderman Govea.
In regard to software and licensing fees in the amount of $50,530.20 funded from Transit Grant /54 Property Services. I'm going to make a motion to accept, place on file, and approve the annual software support and licensing fee for the demand response and fixed route scheduling software with Route Match in the amount of $50,530.20. Funding will be through Department 186 Transportation Fund, Transit Grants, and Local Match /54 Property Services.
Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Division Director. This is a request for approximately $50,000 to actually continue the provision of demand response service and fixed route routing service with our existing provider, Route Match, a subsidiary of Uber. You'll remember at a recent meeting, I actually presented 2 new contracts for the entities that will become our vendor for the future. This is actually a necessary.
All right, the echo has come back, at least on that microphone.
Okay. A necessary belt and suspenders or gap filling software.
Yeah, I think we're doing it from the other room.
I'll pause for a second.
We're working on it. Someone is.
It's like a stadium announcer.
Oh my.
Okay. But.
Speak again.
Hello.
Okay, because I turned.
It's still echoing.
Still
Yeah.
echoing a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I turned off our speaker volume in here, which seems to have helped slightly.
It does seem to help, yeah. I mean,
All right.
continue?
Well, let's, I guess, go ahead, just keep it brief. You know what I mean?
All right, motion to approve. This is a belt and suspenders approach. As we onboard our new softwares, we're going to need to continue service with the existing provider for a period of time as we work through actually rolling it out, beta testing it, obviously, with the public. And so we need to continue another year of provision of the existing route match software, and that's what this specifically does. Happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Any questions or comments? Does anyone echo what or Director Sullivan has to say? No?
Oh, boy.
All right. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Opposing?
And with one opposition vote from Alderman Thibodeau. Next communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager. Alderman Govea.
In regard to FY25 bus services, bus vehicle supplies in the amount not to exceed $50,000, funded from transit grant 61 supplies and materials. I'm going to make a motion to accept, place on file, and approve New England Kenworth as the vendor to purchase various parts for the current bus fleet in the amount not to exceed $50,000. Funding will be through Department 186 Transportation Fund Transit Grant 61 supplies and materials.
Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee. Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. This is a exceedance of $25,000, but a not to exceed of $50,000, having learned a lesson in front of this committee several months ago that I think folks may remember, to purchase parts, miscellaneous parts for our different vehicle fleet over at Transit with New England Kenworth. We order a variety of different parts through them. We don't expect this to exceed $50,000, but in gross total, we do expect it to go over $25,000 of expenditure with them, and therefore we're in front of the committee requesting authorization tonight. Full transparency, if you ask me a single part that we order with this, I will have to get back to you because I don't know the answer to that, quite frankly, but I know that several of our vehicles rely on Kenworth parts, but the specifics of that I can't speak to this evening.
Any questions or comments? Alderman Clemmons.
I just wanted to say I appreciate you coming forward with this as a not to exceed. I think that, and I appreciate also the fact that you think it's going to be closer to the 25,000, but I think giving yourself some leeway is probably smart, so I will support this.
Appreciate that.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
6 to 1. All right, that motion passes. Next communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, Alderman Govea.
In regard to change order for Petra Vista van vehicle in the amount not to exceed $289,985, funded from 5339 FTA Capital Grant and 81 Capital Outlay Improvement. I'm going to make a motion to accept, place on file, and approve change order number 3 with Albrock Low Floor 27 CNG Spirit of Mobility Paratransit Van Vehicle CNG Model 1 with Model 1 in the amount not to exceed $289,985, a decrease of $63,915. Funding will be through Department 186 Transportation Fund 5339 FTA Capital Grant /81 Capital Outlay Improvements.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. Before you is a third change order to a long saga of purchase in order to achieve purchasing one new paratransit van for the Nashua Transit Service. I say it's a saga because we initially actually ordered this vehicle back in 2021. There was an issue where the supplier could not get the parts for what at the time was an electric hybrid vehicle. And so we went through a variety of iterations with them trying to find a design that achieved the low floor requirements that we had, the alternative fuel requirements that we had, but also met all of our other requirements for battery life and all the other things that we provide through our ADA paratransit service. Like a lot of things during that period of time, the cost went up substantially. So we ultimately had to achieve other match funding to purchase this vehicle. And while, in the interest of full transparency, while the change order reflects a decrease in price, it also reflects a decrease in the number of vehicles being purchased. This was initially 2 vehicles and is now only 1 vehicle at a cost of $289,985. I do want to say very clearly, because we recognize that this is fewer vans being purchased, or only 1 van being purchased, we're doing everything we can to find alternative vehicle funding so that we are ultimately able to secure another vehicle. We have 2 currently in the queue that you'll see coming back before the Finance Committee over the coming year that we've achieved funding for. But we're disappointed. I don't want to say directly with the vendor, but at supply chain issues and the pivoting away from certain drivetrains that we've relied on. We're happy to bring on board a new CNG. I think it meets our sustainability goals, but certainly not pleased with the increase in the price of the vehicle, but do hope for your support tonight so that we can replace an aging piece of fleet that we have in place.
Anyone? Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. Through you to Director Sullivan, would if we went with a regular gas or a diesel vehicle on both, would we be able to afford both vehicles?
Happy to answer that question.
Yes, go ahead.
Alderman Clemmons, we would not be able to afford both vehicles. Surprisingly so, perhaps. The small van market is actually something that there's not a huge price differential between the unleaded version versus the alternative fuel CNG version. There are actually quite a few CNG vehicles out there, so that market's not that limited. Pivoting to unleaded would not allow us to buy 2 vehicles. It would likely result in a savings of about $20,000 we've found based on our current research. But again, wouldn't allow us to do that. I will just say that we're going to have that question in front of us several times over the coming years. So there is a delta between the 2 vehicle typologies. We've tried to move towards CNG, and we're going to continue to try to do that. But I'll say that we try to seek additional funding from the state of New Hampshire, and I think we've been successful in doing that because we're doing alternative fuel vehicles as opposed to the unleadeds or the diesels as an alternative.
Okay.
Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you. Are there better grants? This is kind of a 2-part question. Are there better grants or funding available by going with alternate fuel like CNG? That's kind of part of it. And the other one is, to my colleague's question, is the availability or getting things faster and easier by going with a fuel-leaded vehicle if we went with that route? I know there's only $20,000 difference, but could we get it sooner, quicker, faster?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm glad you asked that question because I should have addressed it when Alderman Clemmons asked his. We could potentially get the vehicle faster. Unleaded vehicles are more readily available. That said, to your second question, Alderwoman Clee, the funding, we have basically agreed to receive federal and state dollars conditionally upon this being a CNG purchase. We've basically modified our grant award with them. We could certainly go back and modify it again, but there's a delay that would come with that. So we pivoted ultimately in our agreements with the state and the federal government. We could certainly move towards an unleaded vehicle, but the time savings would not be significant in nature.
Got it.
Alderman Clemmons.
So to go off of that, my colleague there, as a follow-up, so you said that there's a couple of these coming down the pike in the future, and so my question is, do those also have the same type of grants attached to them where they are conditional upon either CNG or environmentally friendly, I guess you would say, vehicles?
So I'm happy to address that. Saying they're conditional, I think, may be an overrepresentation on my part. The way this works is when we are indicating that we would like to purchase new vehicles to the federal government and to the state that ends up matching funding Alderman Clemmons, we indicate to them what vehicle we're intending to purchase. They don't necessarily say you can purchase a CNG versus an unleaded through the traditional funding sources. But once we indicate what we intend to purchase, we sort of lock in with them. and we go forth, we get a price quote, we're programmed at a certain dollar amount. We actually have tremendous flexibility to change that, but it involves modifying the funding that's sort of in their plan and the allocation that they've made to us. I will just bring up the fact that there are going to be 2 additional vehicles coming forward that we had originally intended to be unleaded vehicles, actually. Just last night, I was talking to Administrator Correa. We may pivot those to be CNGs in the interest of achieving broader sustainability goals and all of the things that have been discussed here in other committees. But we're doing that early enough where we don't think there will be a delay when it comes to actually purchasing, because those are coming a little further down the line. It's just hard to pivot in the last minute.
Alderman Clemmons.
So on that point, is there a way that you can lock in a guaranteed price with any of these vendors so that we don't have this situation again?
No.
Okay.
It's a very frustrating answer, but we can lock in as long as we're actually prepared to purchase. So we're locked in here. This price is locked right now. If this gets approved this evening, we know that this vehicle is actually available, as opposed to when the purchase was made several years ago, preceding my presentation to the committee. The 2 that are coming, it's very difficult to lock in until we actually are prepared to sign an agreement and come before this committee. Once we do that, we can lock in, though. But we have to solicit through an RFP process, Alderman Clemmons, and we are going through that right now.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but it would seem to me, though, that if you, I guess, here's my point to this, right? Once we decide, okay, this is the vehicle that we're going to buy, be it through the RFP process or whatever, my question was, when we're at that point, can we lock into the price and hold these vendors accountable to the price that they say, in case there is a delay in the future, be it because they can't get the CNG parts, or they can't get, the batteries, or whatever the case may be? Is that possible? That's
Yes.
kind of what
Yes.
I'm asking.
Yes, I'm sorry. That is possible once we're at that stage. It's just not doable before the RFP, and I guess I should have thought more about your question, but yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, and I only bring that up because I would hope that we do that, because, obviously, we're in a time when there's a possibility that there could be tariffs being put on,
Yep.
And so we want to get these price locks in place as soon as possible, so that, we're locked in, and we want to do that as much as possible, because if the tariffs that they're anticipating do go through, I would anticipate that things like vehicles and other things like that are going to go up in cost. So,
I think that's a great point.
so that was my point for it's a future discussion. I appreciate the leeway. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, on that.
All right, anybody else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passes with 6 in favor and 1 opposed.
Thank you.
Next, communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, Alderman Govea.
Regard to replacement for an uninterruptible power supply in the amount of $99,800 funded from citywide comms projects 71 equipment. Make a motion to accept, place on file, and award a contract to replace the existing uninterruptible power source at the police and fire emergency dispatch centers with Charles S. Kramer in the amount of $99,800. Funding will be through Department 157, Citywide Communications Fund, Citywide Comms Project /71 equipment.
Mr. Mansfield?
Bill Mansfield, Radio Systems Manager for the city. Not too long ago, we went out to RFP to replace the UPS systems that are located at both police and fire. These UPS systems basically provide backup power to the police and fire dispatch centers, as well as the radio rooms that are at those facilities. The current UPS systems are well over 10 years old. They are in serious need of having battery replacement, and the cost of the batteries to replace them with just batteries supersedes the cost of buying new UPS systems. So we went out to bid. We only had 2 vendors bid. We were trying to get a turnkey solution from the vendors. Both vendors submitted pricing on their UPS systems, which you have in the document that was sent to Ms. Gerard, and those were the prices. Then we also had included in there were the electrician prices. Basically, after looking at the prices and what the work that was going to be done, we chose to go and get a 3rd quote on just the electrical work to be performed, and it came out to be substantially less, and we have a lot more confidence with this particular vendor due to the fact that they do a lot of work with communication systems throughout the Northeast. So we're looking to replace these particular units at both police and fire. We're downsizing both the units because technology has changed over the last 20 years, where we have downsized our radio room equipment, and going with Charles Kramer. Basically, it's an Eaton UPS system that we're looking at. He's the reseller for Eaton. 12 kVA UPS units at both police and fire. Has 2-year limited warranty, plus a 5-year 24/7 system monitoring, 3-year battery warranty, and 5 years of annual preventive maintenance. So, and we're looking to have that done. If there are any questions on that.
Anybody? Alderman Clemmons.
So, yes, through you. So the ones that we have now lasted 10 years. Do we expect, even though the warranties are less on this, do we expect another 10 years out of these?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
at a minimum. The batteries are the things that, the thing that costs the most. We anticipate that we'll have to replace the batteries within 3 to 5 years at each of the sites. We try to get them on different cycles, different years to, because of the budget purposes, so
Yep.
that's the game plan.
Makes sense, thank you.
Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How much usage do these systems, like how often are they used?
24/7.
So they're always run, okay.
Right, so basically what happens is the battery systems provide the power to those radio rooms. They're powered, they protect the radio room and the dispatch consoles from any brownouts or anything like that, any fluctuations. So those are constantly running 24/7.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager. Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regard to janitorial services in the amount of $48,000 funded from the center, from the general fund and /54 property services, I'm going to make a motion to accept, place on file, and approve a 1-year contract for the DPW facility cleaning service with Bill's World Class Cleaning in the amount of $48,000. Funding will be through Department 160, Admin/Engineering, and 168 Solid Waste Fund, General Fund /54 Property Services.
Mr. Saunders.
Good evening, Mark Saunders, Deputy City Engineer. The communication set before you is a contract with Bill's World Class Cleaning Service. They have been offering janitorial services for the DPW facility since March of 2023. They've agreed to hold their prices. The administration has been very happy with their work. They're very professional, easy to work with, and they do a great job. The building looks as good as it does today as when it opens, and I'll happily try to address any questions. Thank you.
Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. More of a general question on this. Why isn't this done in-house? And why do we outsource to kind of contract work instead?
So I would say for that, it's our typical office hours or work hours for the staff is between 7 and 5, give or take. This janitorial service comes in after the kind of day-to-day activities happen. We are running typically understaffed in several of the departments. I know for the engineering department, we are down a couple staffers ourselves. So with this, we contracted out. We found they have a great service, and I believe that's the more or less gist of it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, Alderman Govea.
In regard to the Pine Street pedestrian crosswalk project in the amount of $223,223, funded from the Trust and Bond Paving / 54 Property Services and Grants, ARPA and CDBG. I'm going to make a motion to accept, place on file, and award a contract to construct a mid-block pedestrian crossing between Myrtle Street and Pine Street extensions, and to establish a more direct pedestrian route between Clock Tower Place and Mine Falls Park with Daigle Electrical Construction Corp. In the amount of $223,223. Funding will be through Department 160 Admin / Engineering Fund, Trust and Bond Paving 54, Property Services and Grants, ARPA and CDBG.
Good evening, Mark Saunders, Deputy City Engineer. So this is the Pine Street pedestrian crossing. This project looks to establish a mid-block crossing between Clock Tower, just north of Clock Tower, to a more direct route to Mine Falls. The improvements include ADA compliant ramps, a mid-block pedestrian refugee island. Think of the ones out on Main Street, something similar to that. So a person crossing has somewhere a safe resting place if needed, along with rectangular rapid flashing beacons and lighting improvements. This project did go to competitive bid. We are looking to award to the low bidder, Daigle Electric Construction Corporation. The funding for this is the total project cost is $223,000. The lion's share of that, or about $180,000, is all grant funded. The rest of the funding comes from the Sidewalk Trust Fund or the paving bond. With that, happy to address any questions.
Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you. I always ask the same question when I look at the two bids, and they seem to be quite different. There's over $120,000 difference. Do you know why that is?
So Daigle Electric's bid is more in line with the engineer's estimate. That's the prices we're typically seeing. The other bid came in higher, to where if there was only one contractor, we probably wouldn't award it, just due to the price discrepancies between the engineering bid and the actual based on bids.
Okay. So that the other bid, without naming them, is really kind of extraordinarily high, in your opinion?
There was a couple items that there is some specialty work in this. I think that lends itself better to Daigle, one of those being those rectangular rapid flashing beacons.
Okay.
That's probably the biggest item in this contract, and the contractor with the higher bid was about double the price of this contractor, but this contractor is in line with the engineer's estimate on that specific item.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, just briefly, is the idea of this to connect to the Riverwalk?
That's where it spun off from. This project developed, the seed was in community development. As it slowly kind of made its way, there's a demand for pedestrians crossing Pine Street, right where Spine Road is, as it comes up to Clock Tower. So I think it's all eventually going to kind of dovetail into one larger project.
Dangerous there, too.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
I believe the vote is 6-1 in favor, so the motion passes. Next communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, Alderman Govea.
In regard to splash pad for Park Social in the amount not to exceed $200,000, funded from Grant ARPA / 71 Equipment, I'm going to make a motion to accept, place on file, and approve the purchase of a splash pad at Park Social with Water Play Solutions in the amount not to exceed $200,000. Funding will be through Department 177 Parks Fund Grant ARPA / 71 Equipment.
Good evening, everyone. Superintendent of the Parks Department, Brian Conant. This is to approve the purchase of some equipment to create a splash pad at Park Social. This will greatly enhance the park. It's rather underutilized right now in its current state, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on this if there are any.
Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What's the upkeep and maintenance cost on something like a splash pad?
So what we're going to go with here is we're going to go in an in and out system. The water is not going to be recirculated. So the cost to maintain this will be the upkeep on the outside, and obviously an increase in water usage.
Yeah.
So is that intensive labor hours wise for your staff, or is that kind of low maintenance as it is?
We're going this route because it's going to be relatively low maintenance. When you get into recirculating water on these splash pads, the volume of water you're recirculating is relatively low. The output is relatively high, obviously, with the usage, and because of that, the chemicals that you would have to use to have safe water would be extremely high and would be cost-consuming. The other problem with that, with recirculating systems, is there can be a potential for listeria. So that's why we're going with this in and out system, which should save or keep the cost relatively low in terms of maintenance.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, my question is, was this, did this come from was this in the budget this year, or where did this project arise from?
I'd say it's not in the, well, it's not in the budget. I think the Park Recs and Public Works have been looking at this park for a long time, and really there aren't many people using it. They've discussed the idea of a splash pad for some time in order to try to give some relief, heat relief to the kids nearby, which is of course the Tree Streets. And there's no swimming pool in close proximity. And in other locations, it has been the experience that a lot of kids like these, and that we would see, you know, a major increase in the use of the park. And I think their plan is to put like a summer intern out there during the summer to kind of supervise the activity, similar to a lifeguard at the pools, in order to make sure things stay orderly. But we're optimistic that a lot of kids will take advantage of this. Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I guess where I struggle with this is we had a legislation where we're trying to fix the wading pool, right, at Greeley Park. Is that correct? And that has created some controversy, and there's a lot of other needs of existing facilities that we have. So I appreciate wanting to expand and certainly think that there is a need for that in the neighborhood, but I don't know if this is the best use of funds at this time. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to support this.
Any other discussion? Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think that's a very good point that my colleague at large just made, is although the maintenance cost on these splash pads is relatively cheap, we both sat on the ad hoc bonding committee where we went over these kind of a laundry list of projects that need to be done, and is adding another thing that's going to cost money at this point worth it when we have, I'll call them assets in decay right now that need more attention. So I think that's a very valid point. I think I will follow suit and end up voting no on this. Thank you.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Thank you. I appreciate my colleague's view on this, but it seems like people that's underserved always get the back end of everything. That particular area does not have anything. I know that. So the kids can't go all the way over to Greeley Park to live in that neighborhood to use the splash pad over there. I'm going to support it because I think it's unfair that every time something has to be cut, it's cut from the low economic status of those particular neighborhoods. They don't have swimming pools. The swimming pools are all everywhere else but not in that neighborhood. So I'm going to support it because I think it's fair. And I think ultimately that pool will get used significantly, and it will make those kids in that neighborhood happy. We have to support all our kids in the neighborhood, not some of them in some areas. So I'm going to support it.
Alderwoman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So while I respect it, and the truth is, we're talking about things that are going to be fixed within my ward, and I'm still going to fight for those to be fixed. I can't, to my colleague across the aisle here, I agree with everything she just said. I can't take away from this area. I guess the question I'm going to ask to Mr. Conant is obviously the initial cost of this is coming from a grant. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Okay, so this 80,000 we're talking about is coming from the ARPA grant. But to my colleagues that have spoken prior to me, their concern is the upkeep and so on. Do we know what that upkeep cost is? Because they are accurate and correct in talking about a burden that we are putting on the taxpayers for future reference. Do we know what some kind of this cost would be for future cost?
I think future costs would be relatively low. The features above ground are going to be ceramic painted. They're not going to be needed to be painted for a while. There is going to be an additional cost in our water usage, but I think, that's going to be relatively low. I don't have an exact figure for you, but I don't think this is going to add an astronomical cost to our operational budget. I really don't.
Then I guess my next question would be these ARPA funds that we're talking about, this $80,000, to use these ARPA funds elsewhere in the other costs that we're looking at Greeley or something like that. I guess I would feel that they could not be used for, or could they? I guess I'm asking you, Mr. Mayor. Could they be used elsewhere?
I don't think Mr. Conant's going to be able to answer that.
The items that we're talking about.
How about Mr. Cummings, who I see in the audience? Do you think these could be used for a different project? For example, the pool at Greeley, the wading pool at Greeley Park?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. The answer to that question is it's project specific, so I don't want to say necessarily carte blanche, yes, we could use it another way, but yes, are there other eligible projects that you could look to use this money for or on? The answer to that, it could potentially be yes. We have to make sure it's procured appropriately to follow the federal rules and regulations. And we have to make sure it is obligated before the end of this calendar year.
I was going to ask about that particular wrinkle.
Yeah.
So if this money is not, if we don't enter a contract to spend this money by the end of 24, we lose the money, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So we'd have to come up with another project pretty quickly. Alderman Clemens.
Yeah, well, knowing that, then I will support it because I don't want to lose the funding. I think that's a waste of $200,000. I felt that way, and it's probably the opposite of how my colleague from Ward 6 feels. But I feel that when we get a grant like that, if we don't use it, another community will. And that's just the reality. And we can have the argument of whether or not we liked it, federal funding or not, but the reality of it is that if we let it go, it's going to go somewhere else, somebody else will use it, or it's just going to go back into the federal coffers and be reallocated as something else somewhere down the road. So knowing that fact, I will vote for this project, although I do find it disappointing, and only because, we probably don't have the time to reallocate it before the end of the year. So I will support the project, but I find it disappointing that this was brought up as a priority when we have a list of things that we're going to deal with in January that are certainly priorities. And I was using the waiting pool as an example, as a one-to-one.
Right.
I didn't necessarily feel like that's more important or less important or putting one neighborhood against another. It was more of, we have a need, we have a ton of needs. And I just don't think that creating something new right now maybe is the best use of the funds. However, given it's December 18th, I will support it.
I don't think this has a direct bearing on the decision, but hasn't the city of Manchester closed their pools and substituted splash pads because they're a lot cheaper? Now, I think our kids in Nashua really enjoy the pools, and it's a great asset that we have, but they are far more expensive to operate than something like this. Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Director Cummings, if I can.
Yes.
So what would the timeline be if we were to reallocate? How quickly could something like that be done?
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
So before I answer that question, I think it may help if I just provide a little additional context to the source of funding, if I may, and then I'll answer your question. So essentially what happened was the city, as you may or may not know, received approximately $16 million a few years ago, and we had obligated all of those funds, or pretty much all of those funds, and when we were trying to reconcile and understand what we had left as a balance, it turned out we had approximately $300,000 left in ARPA funds, and we knew we needed to have that obligated before the end of this calendar year. And so there was a discussion about potential projects that could qualify and be eligible that we felt an obligation to bring before you, and we had very limited projects that we could choose and pick from because we needed to make sure we were following the proper criteria and compliance. With all that being said, we knew of this need of the splash pad, which has been hanging out there for a while, and there was a gap in funding. And so this appeared to be an eligible project with a bona fide source of funds. And so that's how we arrived at the decision making of using, in this particular instance, this money for the splash pad or the prior expenditure that was just up before you. As you just heard, the cost when we received final bids came in much higher than we anticipated. The reality of the situation was we wouldn't be able to do that project but for these additional unobligated funds from ARPA, and so we were able to close the project gap. And it's going to be a similar, so with that being said, that is how we arrived at these last two expenditures. Now for your question, Alderman Govea, could we look at some other projects, and could we be able to repurpose the money in the next 2 weeks, so long as it met the federal procurement? We could, and you were willing to have an additional meeting so we could get a contract approved, so we could issue a purchase order. The answer to that question is yes. Fundamentally, what we were looking to do is invest in infrastructure and not necessarily operational type needs. And so that's why we looked at some of these eligible, smaller type construction projects. Thank you.
Alderman Govea.
Mr. Mayor, and I will agree with my colleague at large again. I think knowing that we don't have time to look at something else to do, it is very unfortunate that this is being brought to us on the 18th of December and saying we need something by the end of the year to get it done. I'm not going to say no to $200,000 from the federal government. I think any money we could get from them to make our city a better place, absolutely. Do I agree with how this went down? And I guess, do I agree with the assessment from the department that this should have been looked at for kind of new projects instead of fixing what we have? I would strongly disagree with that, because I feel we have a lot of assets that need to be maintained before we should start looking at something new. But I'm not going to let 200 grand slip away. So I will vote yes on this. I do think the project is great. Don't get me wrong. I think it will be used. I think the neighborhood will love it. I think the timing was just wrong on this. But all in all, I think it will be a positive thing for the city. And if we don't use this money, we don't get to keep it. So it's a use it or lose it for me. I really don't have much faith that in the end of December with Christmas and New Year's, we could get something binding and get something going with that money. So I'll come around to support it, but I just really wish we looked at a bigger picture here when looking at this ARPA money.
Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank both my colleagues for their change of opinion on that, and I agree with both their comments. I truly do. I think that they're very valid points, but I think in the end, this is going for a very good area, considering the buildings that have just been built, the new structure, the people that it's going to be helping. I think $200,000 for that area is a good cause. I agree with both of your comments about that maybe we should have looked at it for a different project. But at the same time, I want to say with something that Alderman at Large Moran has said also, is that we also have to look for those, and Alderwoman Timmons has said also, we have to look at those who need us the most, and this area does. Mm-hmm. And both of you have big hearts and have mentioned that as well. So I thank you for your change of heart. Thank you.
And I take your point, but, we redeveloped Bronstein, less green space. This is like practically across the street. So, it does give these kids something to take advantage of in the summertime. All right, any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes on a 6-1 vote. Next communication from Lisa Photo. It's simply informational, so if there's no objection.
Which is one. Professional services for marketing and branding.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I skipped one here.
Okay.
I put a check mark to it, and that deceived me. Next communication is from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, Alderman Govea.
In regard to amendment number 1 for professional services for marketing and branding services in the amount of $80,000 funded from grant ARPA 53 professional and technical services, I'm going to make a motion to accept, place on file, and approve amendment 1 to the contract with Civic Brand to assist in the implementation phase of the study in the amount of $80,000. Funding will be through Department 183 Economic Development Fund Grant ARPA 53 professional and technical services.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. So everything that I just said before, ditto. But I'm here on behalf of Director Hannum, who couldn't be here this evening, essentially to ask for your favorable support for this expenditure. Essentially what this is in a prior contract, she has started to do a placemaking exercise and study some places to activate the public realm. This would be the implementation portion of that. And so what we're looking to do is, as I understand it, that final report is going to be due somewhere around January. Once that report is in hand, I believe she'll be coming back before the Infrastructure Committee to have a conversation about picking a particular site. As I understand it, there's two of particular note. One is strengthening the connection from the High Street parking garage to the Riverwalk area, essentially between two office buildings crossing Factory, or the Library Walk, which, as you all know, connects Main Street up to 14 Court Street and our library. It's a little dated. It needs a refresher. This money, I don't know which project it would be, but this money would go towards making those various construction and aesthetic improvements. Thank you.
Alderman Govea.
Mr. Mayor, so just to be clear, the original was that we approved through here was $145,000. Now this is asking for another 80.
Correct.
Okay. Just follow up comment.
Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if I recall correctly, which I believe I do, when this contract came to us the first time, I voted no on it. Just thought we could spend money differently, and my opinion to this point has not changed in putting another $80,000 towards it. even though it is ARPA grant money, I do understand that, but I feel we could have did something else with it that is better, and, yeah, I just think this is, I don't know.
Anyone else? All right, if not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Why don't we have a division? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 4. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 4 to 3, the motion
I
passes.
feel like I'm in a classroom.
What? Oh, we could make you stand, or, we could do a roll
First
call.
time.
All right. The next, now we are on the communication involving, from Lisa Photo, Director of Public Works, which is informational, and if there is no objection, we will accept that communication and place it on file. There is new business resolutions, none, ordinances, none, tabled in committee, R24-111, Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we remove from the table R-24-111.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And I believe Mr. Mansfield is here on this, which is an amendment to the lease for the tower over at Holman, correct?
Yes.
Or, at Holman.
Just clarification on it.
Yes. We needed you to explain what the amendment is.
Okay. Bill Mansfield, I'm the radio systems manager for the city. There are 3 cell towers currently at Holman Stadium. The newest one, which is Verizon, which is on the back side of the park, right pretty much in center field, was constructed last year. There are 2 at the front of the Holman Stadium, 1 on each side of the main entrance. Those particular towers can only hold 1 cellular array on each of them because of the structure that's there. Over the years, the structure has been enhanced to allow for more antennas to be on there, but currently there's no way that anybody else can go on any of those towers at any of those sites. So we had a contract. Those 2 towers in the front were built 25 years ago. They were before my time of even dealing with these issues. The tower on the left was allowed, basically they're also used as light stanchions for the baseball park as well. The tower on the left is currently rented by AT&T. They have been paying a fee for years. We renewed their contract, I believe, last year. And the one on the right was built at the same time. The one on the right was paid for by, it's a different company, but today it's T-Mobile. It was built by T-Mobile. Both those towers were built by T-Mobile. The initial fee, because we are allowed to gain revenue off that left tower, the initial fee for them building those towers and allowing us to have revenue, T-Mobile was given a very discounted rate back in the day. And after 25 years, they were still only paying $311 a month. So their contract came up because it was ending. I've been dealing with this particular contract since 2020. We've been negotiating back and forth between the city attorneys, their legal, their people. We went through a bunch of different people that they lost for negotiations on their end, so it's just dragged out for a very long time. Because the other 2 towers are paying a certain amount, we figured that these people that are now basically, they have to reinstate their contract because it expired last year, they would come up and be paying the same amount as everybody else because they had 25 years of this reduced rate. So that's where we came up with the $4,200 amount, because the other 2 are also paying right around the same amount at that particular site. So they balked at it, and like I said, it's been 4 years of negotiations. Finally, we have come to an agreement with $4,200. They're going to also give us back pay to August of 2023. And the contract has a increase of 3% a year, which is higher than what some of the other ones are right now. And like I said, it's effective August 28th, 2023, and it expires August 27th, 2043. Every year, annual amount, 3% increase.
All right. Any discussion, questions? Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate the context there, and that's why you do projects like that, right? So that's why, because we got a light stanchion out of it, out of those poles 25 years ago. So, you know, yeah, you give them a sweetheart rate, and we get something in favor of it. But now it's time. That has paid itself, and now it's time to renegotiate. I agree with everything that's been done here. You know, it's kind of the fruit of negotiation. I think that you know, the city benefited, they benefited, and now it's time to move forward. So I will support this.
Any other comments? I would like to say that Mr. Mansfield has done a very good job negotiating on all these towers, keeping track of everything, maximizing the city's revenue for, how many towers do we have, you think?
I think there's a total of, I believe there's a total of 6 towers.
Yeah, in
Off the top
various
of my head.
places, here, Mine Falls, and elsewhere. So thank you very much for your work, and that's my thought. Alderman Govea.
I think we went over this the last time, but the money from this tower goes to Holman Stadium, correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
There's a Holman Stadium Fund, and this goes, when the scoreboard was improved, new scoreboard, this fund paid for that. Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you. It's just these towers go to Holman Stadium or all of them?
Yeah, the Holman Stadium towers go to the Holman Fund.
To the Holman.
The Mine Falls Tower revenue goes to the Mine Falls Park.
Okay, so each one has a different.
And there's one where the money goes to the skateboard park.
Okay. Okay, so
And-
each one has a different fund that it goes to.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All those in favor, what?
Make a motion first.
Oh, we didn't make the motion,
So I'll make
okay.
a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion is to recommend final passage. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have record of expenditures. Alderman Govea.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, I move that the Finance Committee has compiled with the city charters and ordinances pertaining to the record of expenditures for the period of November 29, 2024 to December 12, 2024. I have a question on it, actually.
Yes, go ahead.
So in looking through the record of expenditures for this week, let me just pull it up. It was on page 4 under 118 other general government. There's 54808. There was a payment to the NPAC Corporation for $125,000. And then the one below it to 201 Main Street Real Estate Corp. for $41,250. I was just wondering what those were.
Can we answer that at this point? We can get you an answer, but I'm not sure we can answer it right now. Is that correct?
Correct. So can I move to table? Does this
Have these
need to be
checks been
passed
issued, do
tonight?
you think?
Yes.
You can always move to table. You can vote on it.
You want to table well, I thought you meant table the items. You want to just table?
No, table the record of expenditures
Oh.
would be my motion.
All right, there's a motion to table the approval of the record of expenditures. Any discussion on that motion?
I do have
No,
one.
no,
Can't-
you can't discuss.
Yeah, that's right.
What?
Not
There's no
question.
discussion on the motion to table, I'm sorry. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and this item is tabled to our meeting in January, and at that time, we will have a discussion about, or an explanation of the 2 checks.
Thank you.
All right. Public comment. Any member of the public wish to address the Finance Committee?
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I want to address the capital reserve fund that was set up for the Art Center. And it's a money issue. It belongs before the Board of Aldermen as well. That was set up by Resolution R23-142 in August of 2023. And it was to be set up as a dedicated interest-bearing account. It was to be in a non-lapsing account and not be closed out to the general fund. In other words, we made a capital reserve fund to do maintenance for the Art Center, and as we took money that was came to us from Spectacle based on sales of food, drinks, and merchandise, those quarterly checks would be deposited, and we'd try to grow some money to do repairs on the facility. It would be non-lapsing, it would be, and it would not go into the general fund. And it says specifically, the maintenance and investment of the fund will be overseen by the trustees of the trust fund, which is the Board of Trustees we appointed. The legislation that was signed off on, the analysis done by the CFO, does not match that language. And I think this resolution should be brought up back by the board to address that. Laura Calhoun and I started in October. I just happened to say, oh, I'm going to see how much money is in the Capital Reserve Fund. What have they accumulated so far? I couldn't find it. So I went to Laura, because she's good with all these accounts and trial balances. I said, Laura, you look for it. She says, well, it's not where it should be. I'm confused. Then she said, it's in the general fund. Then she said, it's not non-lapsing, it's zeroed out. The whole thing started to kind of make a story for us. And she said, this is all messed up. It doesn't make sense. She filed a right to know, and she requested the bank statements for it. Just provide me with the bank statements for the Capital Reserve Fund from its inception to current. What she got back is, that was on like the 7th of November. On the 12th, she got back a statement that they needed more time. On the 18th, they delivered no bank statements. And it was the individual checks that were sent by Spectacle to the city. And she wrote back and said, you didn't comply with the law. That's not what I asked for. Those aren't the records. So by the 25th, they came back again and they sent the checks. And he wrote that the city is keeping the investment fund manager, didn't identify who, is keeping a very specific tabulation by hand, I guess, on everything that's going in and out. That's not what we set up here. And today, Mr. Lannon wrote a letter to Laura, because she went to him, and he said, we have nothing to do with this fund. It goes to the tax collector treasurer. We don't know anything about it. We don't provide any oversight. Your legislation says they do. They maintain and they provide investment oversight. And when I tried to research what it means to do maintenance of a fund, it says...
That's time.
That's time?
That's time.
So this obviously needs more time than 3 minutes. And we're frustrated that we're 2.5 months into right to knows and we can't figure this out.
All right, any other member of the public wish to address the Finance Committee? If not, our next item will be I skipped general discussion, which was technically before public comment. But is there any general discussion or remarks by Alderman? Alderman Moran.
Thank you again. I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, and Festivus is also soon at hand.
Any other general discussion or remarks by Alderman? If not, I will look over to the Vice Chair, Alderwoman Klee.
At this time, I motion for adjournment.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
And the meeting of the Finance Committee is adjourned at 8:04 p.m.